The worst part about running for governor is that whenever you mess anything up, it's like how is anyone gonna ever trust me to run for governor if I can't keep my phone charged?
Very relatable.
I mean, I closed my restaurant down, but it was so bad when the restaurant was open because anytime we would screw anything up, I would literally just think, I'm like, if I can't get this order of this quesadilla right, like how is anyone gonna trust me to run for governor?
I don't know how many quesadillas a governor makes, but you know what? That's a good question, though. How many quesadillas does a governor need to make? You're listening to New Hampshire Has Issues, and I am your host, Liz Canada, from the future to say I was really excited to interview Jon Kiper. He ran as a Democratic candidate in the 2024 gubernatorial primary, and he has announced that he's running again for 2026. The governor's race is every 2 years on the even-numbered years in New Hampshire. This whole podcast, New Hampshire Has Issues, kind of begs the question, who would want to be the governor of the state? And Jon Kiper says he would. If you would like to support the show, you can visit patreon.com/NHHasIssues. And for those who are my first Patreons, I'm going to send you a little gift this winter. A special thanks to Seacoast Soils, who generously sponsors this podcast. If you have an idea for an episode, send me an email, newhampshirehasissues@gmail.com. If you know someone who you're like, Liz, you definitely need to interview this person, send me an email. One topic that I really want to cover, and I haven't found a guest yet, is about the cost of tuition in New Hampshire. If you or someone you love is someone I should talk to, send me an email, newhampshirehasissues@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening. Welcome to New Hampshire Has Issues, the podcast that dares to ask, who would want to be governor of New Hampshire? All right, how about you? Do you have a tagline for me?
Sure. I'm Jon Kiper, and I want to be governor to put community first.
Community first.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk community. I love that. So I am your host, Liz Canada, and joining me today is someone who ran for governor in the Democratic primary last time and is running for governor again this time in the Democratic primary, Jon Kiper. Jon, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I've seen your TikToks. I've seen the social media. I'm excited to get to have a one-on-one with you. So a little bit of background. Republicans have been in charge of New Hampshire for a while now. They have been the party in control since 2021. And since then, they have eliminated the wealth tax, given taxpayer dollars to wealthy individuals whose kids are in private school, cut funding for higher education for colleges and universities, when our state already has some of the highest tuition rates in the country. They banned abortion for the first time in New Hampshire's modern history. They made it more difficult to register to vote. They passed a so-called Parental Bill of Rights the same year as banning parents from getting the health care for their transgender teenagers. They defunded energy efficiency, electric assistance, renewable energy. They removed tenant protections and made it easier to evict people. They cut funding for the Arts Council, and they added monthly costs for those on the Granite Advantage program who just want health insurance. So I like to start with a simple question, Jon Kiper. Why do you want to be governor with all of those things that have happened that will probably require some changes? So why do you want to do this?
It's really just a matter of frustration and just, really wanting to live in New Hampshire and wanting to be, frankly, proud of my state. When I first started sort of thinking about this was probably, I don't know, mid-2000s. There was a story about, it was on the Colbert Report. It was a story about this really young person. It was a state rep, they're Republican. They put in this bill that was just totally whack. I can't remember what the bill was. But the funny part was that it was a son and his mother that were both state reps, and they lived together. And so he didn't have to, work because he's living with his mom. And so that was when I started to realize that New Hampshire has got these systemic problems, such as the lack of pay for the legislature, that were preventing a lot of people from succeeding in the state. And it was holding back not just me and my business, but holding back my whole community. And that the education funding in that formula was really at the core of that problem. And I'm just one of those people that I just can't, when I see the bigger picture, I can't just accept it. I can't just relax. I have to feel like I'm fixing it. And that's kind of what happened where, it started with I opened my business. I have owned a restaurant for about last 10 years, since 2015. And what happened was I bought the building in 2016, and the building that I'm in does not have any parking really nearby. And when we opened, everyone said, "You're never going to make it. There's no parking down there. Like, you're never going to make it. No business ever lasts there." So when I bought the building, and I looked about moving to Exeter or somewhere with more parking, but it just made more sense financially for me to buy the building and to stay here. And so I thought, I'm going to get involved and I'm going to get more parking built in Newmarket. And it started out with I got on the first board that I sort of could get on, which was the ZBA, Zoning Board of Adjustment. The very first meeting that I went to for the ZBA, we had a young guy who comes up there and he says, "I want to put an apartment in my dad's barn. He's getting old. I want to take care of him." Seems reasonable. And the ZBA says, "Well, your barn's not attached to the house. And according to the ordinance, you can't put an apartment in there." And so I was sitting there going, okay, this must be just like an error in the way that they wrote the code. Like, surely it shouldn't matter if the building is attached or not, right? And so me and one other guy voted to let him do it. The other people on the board voted to not let him do it. So he ultimately was not allowed to do it. And I just assumed, naively as I was, that the people in the ZBA would call up the town council and say, "Hey, we've got this issue with the zoning code. Like, you should be able to do attached, or unattached ADUs. It shouldn't matter." As naive as I was. And then it turned out that this was intentional and that they didn't want what they thought would be excessive growth in the town by having these unattached ADUs. So that kind of led me down this housing rabbit hole where I realized that the lack of housing was fully intentional. There was no mistakes in why we didn't have enough housing, why I, as a renter, or not a renter, I do own the building. I was a renter, but I live in an apartment. It's 740 square foot. So I learned that my housing was being limited by people who own houses. And if you have the planning board or the zoning board and it's all people that own houses and renters aren't represented because they're just not around as much, then, renters are kind of being, we're at the whim of the homeowners who are protecting their investment. So I sort of started to realize that the government itself was in many ways an obstacle to my economic success. So not only was it this, we didn't have parking, by realizing this housing is kind of being caused by the planning and zoning board's reluctance to allow more housing. And then as I got into the parking issue more, I realized, hey, we're spending, at the time our tax rate was $26. 20 of those dollars went to the school, $6 went to the town for the fire department and police and stuff. So most of our money is going to the school. And I realized there's no money for parking. There's just no money. And my business is struggling. And not only that, but, my property taxes are really high in Newmarket. I mean, it's almost $8,000 a year that I'm paying at my building. And so it was like every year I feel like I'm making money, and then I get the property tax bill in the mail. I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't make any money, And so just feeling like there's these systemic things that are holding the small businesses back, and that basically we have this fractured economy where the rich get richer in these richer towns where they have lower property taxes and the wealth kind of accumulates. And the rest of us in these poorer towns are just sort of left to scramble. And the attitude is like, so I went from the ZBA, it was on another board called Energy and Environment, and eventually on the town council. And it just seemed like when I was on the town council that we were sort of just picking up scraps, in terms of how we were funding the town. This is what a lot of people think. They think their town is being mismanaged because the taxes are high. And then you look at the budget, you're like, everything's really underfunded. And the issue is that the Republicans in Concord are cutting taxes for the rich, cutting taxes for corporations, and no services get cut. Initially, no services get cut. They don't tell you who's going to get cut. So what happens is either your property taxes go up, or your town road doesn't get paved, or the water pipes don't get, replaced that are from 1890, or your teachers don't get raises, or the firefighters can't buy new radios or whatever. So there's like this trickle down effect of the lack of funding. And fundamentally, and this is what I want everyone to take away from my campaign. And it's pretty basic idea. The state of New Hampshire is not raising enough money to fund a state. It's not. And the people that are getting hurt are the most vulnerable people in our community. Elderly people that end up homeless, children that are in YDC facilities, children in the foster care system, just the most vulnerable people, people that are on Medicare, Medicaid, SNAP benefits, all these things are really struggling. And it's going to get so much worse with the cuts that Trump is putting through in the next couple of years.
So you were on the zoning board.
Yeah.
You were on the energy board.
It's Energy and Environment Committee. Yeah.
Energy Environment. Yep. And you were on the town council.
Yeah.
So why town council to running for governor? Why not something in between?
The number one reason is because the state reps don't get paid. And the senators also do not get paid.
Now, wait a minute, Jon Kiper. They do get paid $100 a year.
Yeah.
So they do get paid a little bit. So we can't say they don't get paid. They get paid $100 a year.
The town council, I got paid $1,500, which is not a lot of money. But to me, it's like it's about the principle of the thing, where the principle in economics. I mean, I just could not afford to drive to Concord 3 or 4 days a week to represent my town in an effective way for no money. I just couldn't do it. So that's really where I was like, and again, going back to systemic issues, that's such a big one. When you live in a state that 80% of our reps are rich or retired, we're the only state that doesn't pay, and that doesn't pay very much. That's really why I literally was, I was so frustrated. I went to the Secretary of State's website, and I mean, I knew that the state reps didn't get paid, but I thought maybe the senators get paid. And I'm looking through, I'm like, they don't get paid. And I'm going down the line.
$100 a year for the senators as well. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And then the governor, I'm like, well, he gets paid or she gets paid. And it's only $150 to get on the ballot. So basically my first intention in 2024 was I'm going to raise awareness about this issue, because people are going to say, why are you running for governor? And I'm going to say,
I just said that.
Because the state reps don't get paid. And so a big part of that first run was getting people to think about this. And this, again, is how naive I am. I was certain that the Democrats would hear my message and go, light bulb moment, like, oh, if we focus on paying the reps, we can get young and working class people in Concord, and then all of our issues, all the things that you listed, will be easier to pass. Because even the younger Republicans want housing. Even the younger Republicans want cannabis. And so I assumed that everyone would hear this message. They'd go, because when I would tell people in my restaurant, I'd say, they'd say, why don't we have legal cannabis? Why don't we have enough housing? Why don't we have good schools? And I'm like, because rich and retired people aren't concerned about those things. And even a lot of the Democrats that are great people, if you're like several steps removed from an issue, if you're not the renter, or if you're retired, your mortgage is paid off, your kids aren't in the school system, you just it's just impossible to have the same emotional need to solve the problem as when you're living it. Like I heard the state rep say the other day, I was talking about free school lunch.
Yeah.
And this state rep said, oh, well, it's very expensive. It's very expensive for free school lunch. And this person makes a lot of, is very wealthy. I know. And I mean, not rich, but well off. And I'm like, what's the cost of not doing free school lunch? Like how many kids are going to school hungry, so they're doing poorly in school, their home lives are a mess, and just not being able to be fed at a place that you're mandatory legally forced to go to. And how does that hurt their future? And what does it cost us as a society? Just a little bit of money on food,
Free school lunch has such a significant impact on students being able to learn, being able to focus, families not having to stress about that. Sometimes if kids are not able to eat, other times of the day, like that could be their meal for the day. And so that is a policy that would actually that's a policy that would bring significant benefits to a lot of people, not just the one kiddo either, like the whole classroom, their families, their communities. And yeah, that's been tried. They've tried to pass something like that, and it has not gone through.
Like people just make these kind of assumptions about what we can pay for based on the current budget. And you look at Maine. Maine does free school lunch. Like they are not as wealthy as the state as New Hampshire. Like we're richer than them. And people forget this. New Hampshire is in the top 5 wealthiest states in the country. Like there's no reason for us to not be feeding the kids. And I also think that when they do the projections, and this is just a little side note, when they do the projections for free school lunch, because I've been thinking about this a lot, I think that they're assuming that more kids will eat school lunch than actually would. And I say this just because of talking. My son's 9. He's in the public school system. He loves school lunch. And so it's great because it's like $2. Right. And I'm like,
I don't have to pack a lunch in the morning. Fantastic. Eat hot lunch every day. That's great.
Totally. Yeah. And he loves it. But it's funny because I talk to some of the other parents, and a lot of them will say, oh, yeah, my kid's really picky. Like he won't eat it. Like my sisters will say, like she'll have to go through and pick a couple days a month, but my nephew just will not eat it all the time. It's just one of those issues that I think, again, if the people that are in the committee, if none of them have kids in the public school system, no one would be able to say like, hey, you're doing the math based on 60% of the kids eating school lunch. And I think if you surveyed the kids, you'd find it is only going to be like 40 or something, because like you imagine all these wealthy, yoga moms are probably not going to have their kids eat free school lunch, even if it's free. They're going to want to
Maybe they
pack their
will.
organic salad. And
Here's the thing.
maybe they will.
Kids are great at swapping. They get at school and they're like, do you want this fancy lunch that my mom packed? Because I want the chips. Like, that's just what happens. That's how kids are. They're great negotiators, the kids.
This is true.
You said the first time you ran last year, you wanted to get the word out about how little people get paid when they're a state rep or a state senator. So what about this time? Why are you running this time? Do you want to win? I guess is my question. Are you in it to win it? Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Yes. I'm running to win. And I think this is what I learned in the last run is after the primary, a lot of people in my town who were Republicans said, hey, I wish I could have voted for you, but I'm a registered Republican. And I even had people that wanted to vote for me, but didn't switch their ballot early enough because you have to do it like in June. And they just didn't think of it. And I even had a guy who was a Democrat, but he switched his ballot to vote for Nikki Haley in the presidential primary and then forgot to switch back and then was like, oh, sorry, I couldn't vote for you. And the Republicans were telling me, this was even, I was at a fundraiser, I think it was in Epping, and there was two Republicans, younger, they're under the age of 40, that were state reps. And they came up to me and they said, we hope that you win the primary because we want to vote for you because we don't want to vote for Chuck or Kelly because they just don't really care about our issues. They're not going to do anything about housing. Kelly's made it clear she's not going to like sign cannabis in. We want those two issues addressed. And if you're going to do it, we'll vote for you. And so I think I can win, frankly. I think that I am particularly positioned to win because I'm an outsider, because I have been running a business, because I think I understand Republicans. My parents were Republicans until Obama. They switched ships around George Bush Jr.'s second term. But I understand Republicans. I grew up with them, and I understand the evangelical Christian side because I grew up in that world. So I totally
we could swap stories. Yeah.
Well, and I think once you've done it, you kind of can see through the veil, if you will, and you can see like how to get through to these people in a way that I think lifetime Republicans or Democrats can't. Even just basic things like when I would talk to a lot of Republicans that would come into my restaurant, they're not as radical as the free staters that are in the state house. And many of them, their issues were the same as ours: housing, property taxes, education, And so I'm running to win, and I'm running because I think that Kelly Ayotte is tied to Trump very clearly. And I think that we are going to be in a position where they're going to really want change. So basically, I think that Kelly Ayotte is vulnerable because I think the economy is not going to be doing great by September 2026. And I think
it's having problems now. I don't think we need to even wait that long. Yeah, I think it's happening
Yes,
now.
exactly. And I think it's going to continue to get worse and worse and worse. And I think people are just basically going to stop trusting Republicans on the economics. And I think they're going to be ready for a new economic agenda and a new plan. And that's what I plan to bring.
So I want to give a quick story to you because you did run last time.
Yeah.
My wife, Molly, she took the boys to the candidate forum down in Exeter Town Hall, and it was last May. So it's almost a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And so she took the boys at the time, they must have been 12 and 11. And afterwards, we asked them, what did you think? You saw these three candidates talk. And they said, we liked Jon Kiper. That's who we liked. And so we chatted and they told, what they liked. And so, of course, a lot has happened since then. It's been almost a year and a half later. But I told them this week that I was interviewing you for my podcast. And I said, what do you remember from when you saw him talk? And they said, he wanted to stop homelessness. I remember he wanted to make sure everybody had housing. And they said, he seemed really relatable. He seemed like a relatable guy. And then they also said, he seemed old. We think he might be 40. So question one is 40 old or what? What's happening here? My serious question for you, though, is when I'm parenting these kiddos, these are young men. Yeah. They're going to grow up to be men in New Hampshire, wherever they go. How do you view yourself as, like a role model or a figure for these young men who thinking of themselves as Democrats or thinking of themselves as people who care about these same issues?
Yeah.
Like, how do you see your responsibility in sort of leading the way for these young men?
Yeah, I think it's really important. I think last time on the campaign trail, I started talking about it was like the Roblox to Joe Rogan to Alex Jones pipeline, right? And my campaign manager was like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, "You don't understand. There's this thing where young boys start watching YouTube, and it starts with Mr. Beast and it ends with white supremacy. And we need to be very
Yeah.
careful because we are losing young men to the right because they're being offered it's snake oil, but they're being offered, something. People are talking to them directly and saying,
Mm.
you're important and you matter and come with us. There was a point where it was hard to be, frankly, a man or a boy, I think, in some leftist circles where there was this feeling like if you're a man, you're partially responsible for everything that men have ever done. And this attitude that like men have caused a lot of problems and that the solution will be somewhere else. And I felt that with the Democratic Party at times, and felt like that they were making it that it mattered whether or not, that my gender mattered. And that, people brought this up. This has been kind of an issue where I've been trying to get the Democrats to realize, and I had men come up to me and they would say, do these candidates realize that they're going to need men to vote? I think people don't realize how bad, how toxic masculinity hurts men too, and men have got this ideal, like I've got to be the breadwinner and I've got to go buy a house and have a family. And when that's not economically possible, it's very hard to be proud, and to feel like
Mm.
you're working towards something. And I've met a lot of guys under the age of 30 in their 20s and stuff who are just literally living at their parents' house. They have no motivation, no drive because they just feel like there's no hope and that there's nothing that they can do. And my son, I'm trying really hard to instill in him a sense that we have to fight for the future and that we need to craft the world that we want. And that is an inclusive world that includes, everyone being equal and working together to fight for that sense of equality that we should all have. And I think it's important to me that boys see me and that, I am offering them an alternative to the Republicans and like in a world that we respect women. You know what I mean?
Imagine this world
Imagine.
where we can
And
respect
that,
women.
yeah, and that, that we respect women. One of the reasons that I had my restaurant was so that his mother and I could not, well, this wasn't, this indirectly was one of the benefits was that we didn't have to have childcare because one of us would be watching him and we would
Mm.
just take turns working. And it was really great. I spent like, I mean, that was probably the best part about owning a restaurant. Is I spent significantly more time than uh, many of my friends with my son. I mean, like just so much more time I was able to spend with him. And that was so crucial. And it's something that I want other men to want, to when they have kids to spend time with their sons and build like better relationships than I think I had with my dad. And now it's funny because me and my dad get along really well and my dad gets along really well with my son. And it's just like, we have a much better bond that the three of us do than I ever had with my grandfather and my dad. And I think
Mm.
that that's really important. And I hope that young people will see me running for governor and saying like, look, I don't care that I'm not rich. I don't care that I'm not politically connected. Um, I I'm gonna fight for this thing that I think is worth fighting for.
So how are you? So like I said earlier, I've watched some of your TikToks, right? Like I see you on social media. The boys and Molly obviously saw you at the candidate forum. How are you going to get your message out further? Like, how are you going to reach across New Hampshire? Because, if you're running against Governor Ayotte, she's the governor, so she already has like that sort of platform. She raises a lot of money
Yeah.
to be able to get her message out there.
Yeah.
How are you going to get your message out to the far reaches of the state?
Social media is pretty much the best way that I have found bang for the buck to get message out there. And the hard part is that you have to sort of be everywhere. You have to be on the YouTube, the TikTok, the Meta, Facebook, Instagram, even LinkedIn. And then the other thing is just going to people. We went up to Claremont for one of their school board meetings And so just, I mean, honestly, it's a lot of driving. It's a lot of driving. I was in Keene
Yeah.
on Monday or Tuesday. I was in Manchester today for some campaign stuff. So it's just, you just got to go to the people. And we live in a really fractured media environment where you've got people getting stuff from social media. You've got a small group
Yeah.
still getting stuff from WMUR. You've got some people totally checked out. And it's hard. It's harder now than I think ever has been. So there's not a one size fits all solution for how you get the message out there. But I I'm pretty confident that what we did last time worked pretty well with the social media because, we did decently in the primary. And I think that the momentum will carry on. We're going to need
Hmm.
to raise money for sure. We're going to need to raise a ton of money. We're going to have to do TV ads and all that stuff. But like, I actually just got off the phone with Chris Pappas a little while ago, and he called me just to see how things were going. And I didn't know this, but in his first primary, he got outspent 4-1. So the money's important, but it's not everything. And I firmly believe, and I believed this last time, but I firmly believe, like, if I could get a postcard or something, or somehow get in the brain of every single person, get my message in front of every single person in New Hampshire, I would win in a landslide. And obviously, that's the hardest part. So
Right.
I had a great story on this girl put on a comment in TikTok where she said she was waiting to get her oil changed. She's way up in Berlin, and this old man's kind of complaining about, taxes, the price of the oil change. He's got no money. And she started telling him about me. And she was like, yeah, this guy's even talks about like taxing the rich. He's talking about, all this stuff. And this guy was like, very Republican area. And he was like, maybe it's time we start taxing the rich. Like, I want to learn more about this guy, Jon Kiper. So it's kind of funny because that's how we win. It's just like little stories in cafes, people talking to each other, these little conversations, in cafes and bars and restaurants. And I try on social media to get people to understand that they have a lot of power and they can actually save me a ton of money rather than me having to pay for text messaging and social media ads. If you just text 5 of your friends or you just reshare this video, you just saved me a couple bucks. So, and you can do that instead of donating if you got no money. I think that's just the most important thing is for people to realize that right now, because of social media, you can not just help me, but you can help any of your favorite candidates in your state. And everyone should be doing that. Like, commit a little bit of time to just reposting and just intentionally sharing messages with people, I think would go really far.
I really want to have an episode about the algorithm because the algorithm on the social medias is actively working against folks who are trying to make change to what's the current sort of status quo, what's happening by our state government, by our federal government. Like the algorithm is actively working against. So I feel like I tell this to people all the time. Like if you see something that you like, you should like it and share it because just like laughing to yourself, it's not helping anything. Yeah. So like you have to actually engage with the good stuff. Avoid the bad stuff, engage with the good stuff. One of the reasons I was really excited for you to come on the show is because I've had episodes about the different parts of the government. So I'm hoping you can explain to the listener, what does a governor even do? What's unique about the New Hampshire governor specifically?
So, what's really unique about it is that we have what's called a weak governor, which is kind of funny.
Zing, but also true. Right, yes.
Yeah, the governor doesn't have a lot of power, which is kind of a wild thing. You think, why do people want a job where you don't have a lot of power? And the reason is because the governor can veto legislation that the governor doesn't like. But besides that, a lot of what the governor does is working with the executive council, and so I'm sure you guys covered this, but, they do all the contracts and appointments and all that stuff. So the governor is really working right with the executive council to get a lot of the, the stuff happening in the background that keeps the state functioning. That a lot of it's not sexy stuff. It's like, approving a new highway contract.
Are you saying highway contracts aren't sexy, Jon Kiper? Is that the stand? Is that the position you're taking on highway contracts?
That is my stance. And so, it's kind of funny because like the governor does have like a huge role in terms of how do I say this? But the vibes, I guess, that the governor is bringing to the state and what their party, how their party is going to sort of function, and I plan to work really closely with my friends that are state reps so we can get good legislation written and work with them to address the things that I'm campaigning on,
Mm.
and we're pretty much all the Democrats are really trying to have a unified message. And this was not actually intentional. I just was like, hey, we got to focus on property taxes. And it turns out other people are thinking the same thing. So that's becoming a really big issue.
That's the thing. That's what's on everyone's mind is property taxes and how much property taxes have gone up, how much health insurance is going up. Like all of these costs are definitely going up. And yes, like the executive council is a part of the equation of working with or against the governor. Like they can work together or they can work not together. And that's how it can be. Talk to me about the working, the united message of Democrats. I'm interested to hear that. Like what is the message? I think people want to know that about Democrats. What's the message that Democrats are bringing?
Yeah, so I definitely don't want to speak for everybody. I think where we have gotten sidetracked before is not having a unified message. So I think that if I was going to say there's one unifying goal for the Democrats this time, it's going to be focusing on economic issues and realizing that the independent voters that we need that voted for Trump and Kelly Ayotte last time, their biggest concern was economics and how their wallet and those kitchen table issues. And when you look at that, the big ones are property taxes, housing, and education funding. And so the way that I came up with this term, well, there's a ton of issues.
That's the whole podcast. New Hampshire does have
issues. There's sort of an infinite number of things that you can campaign on.
That's true.
But we really, in my mind, I have to focus on three things because that's really people's attention span. That's how much things that they can remember. And last time I sort of made the mistake of focusing on too many things. And I'm like, I want people to just be able to walk away after hearing me speak and know what I'm doing and how I'm going to do it. And so this is what our campaign is based on, this idea of community first economics. And it's basically the opposite of Ronald Reagan's trickle down economics, which was we're going to cut taxes for the rich people. We're going to cut taxes for corporations, cut, regulation for corporations. And then the money will magically trickle down to poor and middle class people. We now know that was BS. That never happened. It was never going to happen. There's not like a quirk of the system that was intentional. So we need to do the exact opposite of that and invest in our local community and ensure that, a single mom doesn't have to work 60 hours to just pay her bills, and that, elderly people aren't getting evicted from a mobile home park because property taxes went up, or that some kid who's 25 and living in his parents' basement has hope of getting a good job and someday buying a house and starting a family of his own. And focusing on these issues that, like, Republicans have these same issues. Republicans have housing issues and especially property tax issues and education funding. They generally, most people with kids want their schools well funded. And the thing about it is, number two, the Republicans have absolutely no good answer for the question of why are my property taxes so high and what are you going to do to lower them? If you ask a Republican in Concord right now that question, they will say it's your local budget committee's fault. It's your local town's fault. It's your school board has probably got 50 admin. It's BS. So we need to project a attitude that not only are we going to help the middle class and the working class, tell them how we're going to do it in a simple enough way that it's not super convoluted, but also make sure that they understand that the messenger is trustworthy. And I think people will trust me simply because I'm a poor person trying to solve poor and middle class people's issues, And so this is what happens, I think, is we elect these rich people, right? And they hear our issues and they give lip service to them. And then they get in there and they go, oh, shucks, another 2 years and we couldn't solve any problems for poor people. Like, that stinks, but whatever. And then they move on. When I'm going to be driven to solve all of these problems because they are my problems, and they will be my problems after I'm governor. They will be, so the drive for me and the accountability is internal. Like, I need housing to be lower, to be more affordable, to have a business that functions, or to literally move out of this 740 square foot apartment. Like these issues are just like, I'm living the struggle. I'm suffering with every single one of these problems. And I think that the solution is pretty simple. It's tax the rich, and we used to tax the rich in this state pretty well. And when we did, our finances were actually doing pretty well. We're not an extravagant state. I'm not looking to add billions of dollars to the to the budget right now. We just do not have enough money, and we need to increase that a little bit. We don't need a ton of money. I don't want to live in a Massachusetts style state with massive, government spending, because it has downsides too. I talk to restaurant owners in Massachusetts and they'll tell me, like, the permitting's annoying. The way they do the liquor licenses is expensive. Their insurance is higher. The regulations on the restaurants are much more annoying. Like, I don't want to live in that world. Like, I actually like a lot of the way that New Hampshire does things. I want to maintain New Hampshire's sort of character and the things that we like. Like, we're Yankees, we're cheap, and I'm okay with that. One thing in New Market that's interesting is, as I was saying before, our departments are all underfunded. And our water treatment plant, the guys that run it are really great, because they actually, because they didn't have enough employees, because the budget was so low, they started using cameras and stuff to check the sewer pipes. And it was actually much more efficient than having humans do it. And they got an award because of how innovative their use of cameras and technology was. And, like, that's great. But we are at this point where we Yankee ingenuity will only get us so far, and we need more money to function as a state. And what they're doing right now is the Republicans are being penny wise and pound foolish. They're cutting taxes in the short term in ways that cost us money in the long term, if not just in property taxes, but also, you look at the YDC lawsuits, and because we didn't spend $10 or $20 million over the course of the last 30 or 40 years in human resources, as in the people running the YDC centers, we're now going to pay $500 million in lawsuits. It just doesn't make it's not fiscally conservative, even what the Republicans are doing. It's just, like, foolish. It just doesn't, like, there's no logic there when it costs more money in the long term, but they know, like, it's a 2-year term. I might not even be around in 20 years when this comes home to roost, but it is coming home. The fiscal doom loop is real in New Hampshire.
I want to pivot a little bit.
Sure.
Because when I think about the governor's seat,
yeah,
of course I think about the policies and the issues and the things that I care about. But I also care about how someone is as a leader.
Yeah.
And so how would you describe yourself as a leader? Like, outside of the policies, outside of the issues, like, who are you as a leader?
Yeah, with my restaurant, I really tried to set people up to succeed kind of on their own terms. I don't like to micromanage people. I like to set expectations and say to someone, how you get from here to there, I'm not that worried about it. I'm worried about the final product. And one thing that I really like to do is explain to people why every step in the process is happening. And when you're training people to say, here's why I've learned to do this a way that's different than I was doing before, or whatever, so that people understand what they're doing, what you're trying to achieve, but then have some autonomy to achieve that goal without being totally micromanaged. And like, I am a big fan of, hey, if you've got an idea that's better than mine, bring it up. Like, in my restaurant all the time, I'd say, hey, if you have more experience in this world than if you've worked at another restaurant nicer than mine, tell me how to do this. Like, I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. You know what I mean? I want to be surrounded by people that are smarter than me on all these issues. And the biggest, I think, one of my biggest, or what I try to maintain, is a sense of, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm not a perfect person. I'm going to own up to those mistakes when I make them and try to learn. You can't really learn without making mistakes. It's really important. But also, with the people that I'm working with, have a sense of accountability, and that they're, willing to, it's really important that when somebody messes up, they're willing to come to you and say, hey, we just screwed this up. We screwed up this thing, but we're going to fix it. That was a lesson I learned at one of my first jobs. I was working with this carpenter, and he said, the difference between a professional and an amateur is that the professional, when he screws up, he fixes it, even if it means tearing a whole wall down that you just built. The amateur will say, oh, we're off by a couple inches. Let's just jam up jam a little board in there and we'll cover it up. And that's just something that I've always held in the way that I ran my business. And, in terms of, like, the way the government functions, I think it's really important that we don't get so obsessed with the process that we fail to see is it giving us the outcome that we want.
You're the first person on the podcast who's actively running for an elected seat, right?
Oh,
You're
cool.
the first one. I've had elected officials on, but you're the first one who's like, I'm running.
Cool.
So I thought I would test something out.
Sure.
And I asked a non-political person, someone who does not follow politics, what would you ask someone who's running for governor? Like, what's the question that you would ask? And so shout out to Julie, who gave me this question.
Thank you, Julie.
If you're eating at a restaurant and it's packed, it's busy, you've been waiting on your food, it's been a while, the server's very friendly, but like forgot to give you your ranch dressing, forgot some things. How much do you tip the server?
I always tip 20%. I never have made my tipping about the service because it's not the rest. I mean, I just know enough to know it's not the server's fault if the kitchen is messing up. Yeah. And I always tip 20%. The only thing I will say, like if I go to a restaurant and I have a bad experience, I just won't go back. I'm not going to leave a bad review. I'm not going to be a bad tipper. I'm just not going to go back. And I think that more people should just do that rather than leaving these long negative reviews. I mean, sometimes, when I was running my restaurant, we occasionally did have reviews that were helpful, negative ones that would say like, I mean, sometimes there's nothing you can do. Oh, you used to have this item on the menu. Now you don't. I mean, one time we got a bad review about like a piece of art. Somebody thought it was satanic. He was like, he had satanic art. And I'm like,
that could be a positive for some people. Hello. Yes.
Yeah. Right. So I wish more people would have a little bit more grace.
All right. So the answer is 20% always. If you don't like it, you don't go back. Love to hear it. My other question for you is Halloween is coming up.
Yes.
And so at the Kiper household, what are you giving out at the door? Are you a full-size candy bar person? Are you little packs? Are you a bucket outside with a sign?
We usually do the big bowl with, assorted candies. It's kind of funny because normally I do it like through the restaurant. And I don't know, we didn't sign up. Like normally the rec department just goes around because we're like, and they put a little flag out. And I didn't even really think about it this year. So I don't know if I'll be doing it. I guess I probably should.
Yeah, that's the question we want to know. What will be at the Kiper household for Halloween?
I usually I try to buy a few, as many like mixed bags of like, I try to get like a couple of the good ones. The Reese's and the, peanut butter cups. And then, also throw in a few of the ones that are like the sweeties and like the little sugary, the ones that people don't like as much. I don't know. I try to mix it up a little bit so that there's some options.
Something
I will
for
say, though,
everyone.
You put in too many options and the little kids, I mean, some of them, it's like a deer in headlights. They're trying to pick out their candy.
Yeah.
And mom's like, hey, we got to go. There's like 30 other places to go.
We got other places to be.
It's one of my favorite days in town because everyone's just psyched, like they're going to all the businesses and getting candy and the kids are all so cute and
pumped up on sugar, out in their costumes. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah, it's a good time. So I probably should. I probably should sign up to do that because people love candy.
All right, well, that's your homework, Jon Kiper. You got to go and figure out your Halloween situation. It feels weird calling you John. I feel like in my mind you're Jon Kiper. You have one of those superhero names. Have you gotten that before where it's like you have to be Jon Kiper?
No.
Really?
When I had the restaurant open, it was sort of annoying because everyone thought my last name was Boston because my restaurant was called Johnny Boston's, right?
Oh.
I didn't realize how many people like literally thought my last name was Boston. So I had to go through this whole process of being like, no, I'm Jon Kiper. And
I have the name of Canada, so I get that a lot anyway.